Somewhere in a dresser drawer, wrapped in an oil-stained cloth, sits a knife your grandfather carried into the woods every fall. He paid a few dollars for it at the hardware store. Today, some of these forgotten blades sell for thousands. We're counting down 20 hunting knives that once rode on the belts of American grandfathers, sheath knives and folders that field-dressed deer, whittled kindling, and were handed down like heirlooms, but quietly vanished as factories closed and tastes changed. Number 2 on this list can bring thousands at auction. And number 1, collectors have paid the price of a pickup truck just to hold one. Before we start, hit subscribe, because the knife-gathering dust in your garage might be worth a small fortune. Let's begin the countdown with number 20. Number 20, the Colonial and hardware store knives were the honest workhorses of a generation that could not afford anything fancy. Sold from a spinning rack at the corner hardware store or the back page of a Sears catalog, these fixed-blade sheath knives cost $1 or $2 in the 1950s and asked nothing of the man who bought them. Stamped from carbon steel with stacked leather handles and a stubby clip point, they rode on the belt of every weekend deer hunter from Pennsylvania to Missouri. Grandfathers used them for everything: dressing a buck, cutting rope, and prying open a can of beans over a campfire. The leather washers darkened with sweat and neat's foot oil until the handle molded to one man's grip. Nobody babied them. They were meant to be used, sharpened on a creekstone, and forgotten in a tackle box. Yet today, collectors hunting for pre-war examples in original sheaths will pay $50 to $150 for a knife that once cost pocket change. The humble ones, it turns out, got thrown away, which is exactly why the survivors are worth something. Number 19. The Imperial Camp King folder was the knife tucked into a boy's first hunting coat, the one his grandfather pressed into his hand before his first trip into the woods. Made in Providence, Rhode Island, Imperial built these two-blade folders by the millions, selling them for under $2 through the 1940s and 50s. A spear point master blade paired with a combination can opener and cap lifter, wrapped in a jigged composition handle meant to look like bone. It was never a fine knife. The bolsters were thin, the springs soft, and the steel took an edge but did not hold it long. Yet the Camp King went everywhere: squirrel hunts, fishing trips, Boy Scout camps, the glove box of a Ford pickup. For countless American men, it was the knife they learned to whittle with, the one that taught them to respect a blade. Because they were cheap, most were used to death and discarded. A clean example with crisp stamping and a working shield now brings $40 to $90, and the rare boxed ones climb past that. Sentiment, more than steel, drives the price. Number 18, old hickory blades crossed over from the kitchen to the deer camp with no complaints and no pretense. Made by Ontario Knife Company in upstate New York, these plain high-carbon butcher knives cost less than $1 and were built to work the farm. But thrifty grandfathers knew a secret: that thin, hard carbon steel took a screaming edge and skinned a deer better than knives costing 10 times more. So the 5-inch butcher pattern got a handmade leather sheath and rode into the woods every November. The hickory-colored hardwood handle, fastened with 3 steel rivets, went gray and gnarled from years of hand-washing and hard use. The blade developed a dark patina that old-timers swore kept it from rusting. There was nothing collectible about it in its day. It was a tool a farm wife would replace without a thought. Yet vintage old hickory knives with clean stampings and honest wear have become quietly sought after by traditionalists who understand that plain carbon steel outperforms fashion. Old examples trade for $30 to $80 more when the sheath survives. Proof that the plainest tool can outlast the fancy ones. Number 17. Robeson ShurEdge knives carried a reputation for quality that outshone their modest price. Made in Rochester and later Perry, New York, Robeson stamped ShurEdge on hunting knives that grandfathers trusted for decades. The fixed-blade models wore genuine stag or stacked leather with a deep clip point ground thin enough to slip through hide in a single pass. A ShurEdge cost $2 or $3 in the 1940s, a fair sum for a working man, but the steel earned it back. These were knives a father saved for, then handed down. The company also made pocket folders prized for their fit and finish, the blades snapping shut with a solid, confident click. Robeson faded in the 1960s, absorbed and eventually shuttered as cheaper imports flooded the market. That disappearance is exactly what makes them valuable now. Collectors chase the ShurEdge stamp because the company never cut corners, and clean fixed-blade hunters with intact stag now command $100 to $250. The name meant something once. Those who remember a Robeson on their grandfather's belt understand why it still does. Number 16. Camillus built more knives than almost anyone in America, and yet the good ones vanished from woods and pockets alike. From its factory in Camillus, New York, the company turned out hunting knives under its own name and for Sears, Remington, and the U.S. military. The 4-inch fixed-blade Hunter, with its leather washer handle and mirror-polished carbon blade, was the knife a grandfather bought at the sporting goods counter for a few dollars and carried for 30 years. It field-dressed deer, cleaned trout, and split kindling without a chip. Camillus knives were everywhere, which is why nobody thought to save them. When the factory finally closed its doors in 2007, after more than a century, an entire tradition of American cutlery ended overnight. Suddenly, the ordinary Camillus became a piece of history. Collectors now seek the older stampings, the sword brand markings, and the sturdy fixed-blade hunters that once cost pocket change. A clean vintage Camillus Hunter in its original sheath sells for $60 to $150, and the scarcer patterns climb higher. The everyday knife became a relic when the everyday factory died. Number 15. Kinfolks hunting knives came out of Little Valley, New York, from a family with cutlery in its blood. Founded by members of the Case clan, Kinfolks built rugged sheath knives through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that rivaled far more famous names. The classic model wore a stacked leather handle capped with a polished aluminum pommel, the clip-point blade ground with a graceful sweep that made short work of dressing game. A Kinfolks cost around $3 new, and grandfathers who carried them swore the steel held an edge through a whole season of hard use. The company also supplied knives to the military during the war, which only deepened their reputation for toughness. But Kinfolks could not survive the post-war squeeze, closing for good in the late 1950s. That short lifespan is what makes them prizes today. Because the company vanished, every surviving Kinfolks is a finite artifact, and collectors pay a premium for clean examples with sharp stampings and original leather. Vintage hunters routinely bring $100 to $200, and the rarer marked models more. A forgotten name, remembered only by those who know. Number 14. The Cattaraugus 225Q was the knife that went to war and came home to the deer stand. Made in Little Valley, New York, this stout fixed blade earned fame during the Second World War, when Cattaraugus supplied them to American servicemen who needed a tool that could do anything. The legend held that 225Q stood for quartermaster, and the design showed it: a thick 6-inch blade, a heavy pommel meant for hammering, and a stacked leather handle secured with a red spacer. When the soldiers came home, the 225Q went hunting. Grandfathers who had carried one through the Pacific or across Europe would not part with it, and it rode on their belts every fall for the rest of their lives. That personal history is woven into every surviving example. The knife was built like an anvil, so many survived, but the ones with clean blades, crisp markings, and original sheaths have become genuine collector pieces. A good 225Q now sells for $100 to $250, with pristine wartime examples fetching more. It carried a generation through war and peace alike. Number 13. Queen Cutlery hunting knives wore some of the finest stag handles ever fitted to an American blade. Made in Titusville, Pennsylvania, Queen built fixed-blade hunters with genuine stag, so richly colored and deeply jigged that collectors covet them purely for beauty. But these were no shelf queens. The carbon and later stainless blades were ground thin and sharp, made for a grandfather who took his hunting seriously. A queen cost a few dollars more than the bargain brands, and men who bought one knew they were getting something special. The stag darkened with handling, the brass guard took on a warm patina, and the whole knife aged like a good rifle stock. Queen struggled through the decades of import competition before finally closing in 2018, ending another chapter of American cutlery. Now, the older Queen hunters, especially those with premium stag and clean tang stamps, have become serious collector targets. Clean vintage examples sell for $100 to $300, and the best stag can climb well past that. Beauty and function together from a company that no longer exists. Number 12, Schrade's Old-Timer and Uncle Henry lines were the last great American hunting knives that nearly every grandfather owned. Made in Ellenville, New York, these knives came along a little later, from the 1960s onward, but they earned a place in millions of hunting coats. The Old-Timer Sharpfinger, with its distinctive upswept skinning blade and saw-cut handle, became the deer skinning knife of a generation, sold at every hardware store for under $10. The Uncle Henry line offered a touch more polish with nickel-silver bolsters and a leather and brass sheath. Grandfathers bought them by the thousands, carried them for decades, and gave them to grandsons as first knives. Then, in 2004, Schrade closed its American factory, and production moved overseas. Overnight, the USA-made originals became collectibles. Now the pre-2004 Ellenville knives are hunted down by nostalgic buyers who remember the real thing. A boxed American-made Sharpfinger, or Uncle Henry, now sells for $40 to $150, far above its original price. The knife that seemed too common to matter became the one everyone wants back. Number 11. Ka-Bar built its name on knives so tough that soldiers and hunters told stories about them, and the old ones from Olean, New York, have become treasures. Long before it made the famous Marine fighting knife, Union Cutlery Company stamped Ka-Bar on hunting knives that grandfathers carried into the deep woods. The fixed blade hunters wore stag or leather, with thick blades ground for hard use and a build quality that shrugged off decades of abuse. A pre-war Ka-Bar cost a few dollars and repaid it many times over, dressing game and clearing trail without complaint. The very name became legend. The story went that a fur trapper wrote to the company thanking it for a knife that helped him fend off a bear, signing off "kill a bar," and Union Cutlery adopted the phrase. Whether true or not, it stuck. The oldest Union Cutlery Ka-Bar hunting knives, especially those with dog-head handles or premium stag, have become prized collector pieces. Clean vintage examples sell for $150 to $400, and the rarest patterns command far more. A name built on toughness, now valued for its history. Number 10. Winchester hunting knives carried the most famous name in American firearms straight into the deer woods. From 1919 to 1942, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company made knives to go alongside its legendary rifles, and grandfathers who trusted the name for their guns trusted it for their blades. The fixed blade hunters wore stacked leather or stag, stamped with the Winchester name that meant quality across the country. A man who carried a Winchester rifle and a Winchester knife into the woods felt properly outfitted, and these knives dressed countless deer through the interwar years. Winchester stopped making knives in 1942 to focus on the war effort, and the original blades were never made again in that golden era. That firm cutoff created one of the most collectible names in cutlery. Any genuine pre-1942 Winchester knife is a piece of American history, and collectors pay accordingly. Clean fixed blade hunters with clear stampings sell for $150 to $500, and rare examples climb into four figures. The name on the rifle became the name on the knife, and both became legends. Number 9. The Puma White Hunter was the knife American hunters coveted, but few could afford. Made in Solingen, Germany, and imported through the 1950s and 60s, the White Hunter arrived at a time when a grandfather's usual blade cost a few dollars, and this one cost $20 or $30. It was the knife in the glass case at the sporting goods store, the one a man saved for or received as the gift of a lifetime. The stainless blade came razor sharp with a distinctive sawtooth spine. The stag handle was flawless, and the fit and finish put most American factory knives to shame. Puma stamped each one with a date code and a running wildcat, marks collectors now study like scripture. American hunters who could afford a White Hunter treated it as an heirloom, and it passed down through families as a prized possession. Today, the vintage Solingen examples with genuine stag and clean date codes are serious collector pieces, selling for $200 to $500 and more for early models. The knife every hunter wanted became the knife every collector wants. Number 8. The Remington bullet knife is one of the most coveted names in American cutlery, and grandfathers who owned one guarded it well. Remington made these large folding hunters from the 1920s into the early 1940s, and they earned their nickname from the shield set into the handle, shaped like a rifle cartridge. The premium models wore genuine stag, with two blades that opened with authority and a build quality meant to last generations. A bullet knife cost real money in the Depression years, and owning one marked a man who took his hunting seriously. When Remington left the cutlery business during the war, the original bullets became instant heirlooms, hoarded and handed down. That scarcity, combined with the iconic shield, has made them among the most collectible folding knives ever produced in America. Original pre-war Remington bullet knives in good condition regularly sell for several hundred to well over $1,000, and the rarest patterns command far more at auction. The cartridge shield became a symbol, and the knife beneath it became a small fortune waiting in a drawer. Number 7. Case knives were the ones that grandfathers actually kept, and the old ones now anchor collections across the country. Made by W.R. Case & Sons in Bradford, Pennsylvania, Case built hunting knives and folders that became synonymous with American tradition. The fixed-blade hunters wore stag or laminated wood, but it was the tang stamp that collectors learned to read like a calendar, the famous Case XX era from 1940 to 1965, marking the golden age. A grandfather's case rode in his pocket every day, and in his sheath every hunting season, sharpened so many times the blade grew thin. Because Case built loyalty, families kept these knives rather than tossing them, and that devotion created a collecting world all its own. Certain discontinued patterns, rare stag hunters, and clean Case XX examples now sell for hundreds of dollars, and the scarcest can reach the thousands. The dot dating system on later knives turned collecting into a science. A case that cost a few dollars at the hardware store can now fund a weekend away, if a family can bear to part with it. Number 6. The Buck 110 folding hunter changed what a hunting knife could be, and the early ones have become quiet treasures. Introduced in 1964 by Buck Knives, the 110 was a lockback folder strong enough to do the work of a fixed blade with a clip point blade that snapped open and locked solid. The ebony handle, framed in polished brass, gave it the look of a fine tool, and grandfathers carried it in a leather belt pouch everywhere they went. It became the best-selling hunting knife in America, dressing more deer than perhaps any other single design. Because Buck made so many, most people assume they are worthless, but the earliest examples, with their distinctive early stampings and construction details, have become collector prizes. First-generation 110s from the 1960s in clean condition sell for well over $100, and rare variants and prototypes climb into the thousands. The knife that seemed impossibly common turns out to have a valuable youth. A grandfather's worn Buck 110 might be ordinary, or it might be an early one worth a serious look. Number 5. The Western W49 Bowie was the big knife every boy dreamed of and every grandfather secretly wanted. Made by Western Cutlery in Boulder, Colorado, the W49 was a massive clip-point Bowie with a stacked leather handle, a heavy guard, and a blade long enough to feel like a short sword. It was never really needed for dressing a deer. A smaller knife did that better, but it rode along on hunting and camping trips because it looked magnificent and chopped through anything. Sold from the 1960s onward, it became an icon of American outdoor gear, the knife propped in the corner of a hunting cabin and admired by every visitor. Western built them tough, and they survived hard use, but the early examples with certain stampings and construction have become genuinely collectible. Vintage W49 Bowies now sell for $100 to $300, and the earliest first-year knives and rare variants climb well beyond. Western cutlery itself is long gone, absorbed and closed, which only sharpens the demand. The dream knife of a generation became a collectible worth chasing. Number 4. Marble's knives set the standard that every other American hunting knife tried to meet. Founded by Webster Marble in Gladstone, Michigan, the company built the Ideal and Woodcraft hunting knives that defined the sporting blade in the early 20th century. The Ideal wore a stacked leather handle with colored spacers and an aluminum pommel. The blade ground thin and elegant, and it became the knife serious woodsmen carried from the 1900s through the 1940s. A Marble's cost more than the bargain brands, but it was a knife for a lifetime, and grandfathers who owned one treated it as a prized possession. The company practically invented the modern hunting knife pattern, and its early catalogs read like a wish list for the American outdoorsman. Because the finest examples date back over a century, the early Marble's knives have become blue-chip collectibles. Clean pre-war Ideals and Woodcrafts with intact handles and clear stamping sell for $200 to $600, and the earliest and rarest examples reach well into the thousands. The knife that started it all became one worth a small fortune. Number 3. Ruana knives came out of Montana by hand, one at a time, and they carry the soul of the American West. Rudolph Ruana, a blacksmith, began forging knives near Bonner, Montana in the 1930s, often using tough steel from old vehicle springs, and his blades earned a fierce reputation among hunters and outfitters. A Ruana was not something you found on a hardware store rack. You ordered it, waited, and received a knife built to survive the Rocky Mountains. The stout blades, aluminum pommels, and stamped maker's marks became legend among Western hunting guides who trusted them season after season in the high country. Grandfathers who hunted the mountains carried a Ruana with pride, and the knives passed down as family treasures. Because each was handmade and the early ones are increasingly scarce, Ruana knives have become serious collector pieces, with the different maker's stamps helping date each blade. Vintage Ruanas commonly sell for $200 to $800, and the earliest stamps and rare patterns command far more. A handmade Montana legend, worth a fortune and still worth carrying. Number 2. Randall Made knives are the most famous handmade blades in America, and owning one has always meant something. Bo Randall began making knives in Orlando, Florida in the 1930s, and his shop has turned out handcrafted fixed blades ever since, each ground and finished by hand. A Randall was the knife a grandfather saved for, waited months or even years to receive, and carried as the crown jewel of his outdoor gear. The hunting patterns wore leather washer or stag handles with blades of tough tool steel that held an edge through the hardest use. Randalls went to war on the belts of soldiers and into the woods with serious hunters, and everyone carried the prestige of the Randall name. Because the waiting list has stretched for years and vintage examples are finite, Randalls have become blue-chip collectibles that only climb in value. Older Randall knives regularly sell for $500 to well over $1,000, and rare early models and special orders reach into the many thousands. A grandfather's Randall is never just a knife, it is an heirloom that holds its fortune. Number 1. Skagel knives are the holy grail of American cutlery, the blades that started the entire handmade tradition and now sell for staggering sums. William Skagel, a reclusive craftsman working in Michigan from the early 1900s, forged knives entirely by hand without electricity, and his distinctive fixed blades, with their stacked leather and stag handles, hand-forged guards, and unmistakable maker's stamp, became the inspiration for every American knife maker who followed, Bo Randall included. Skagel made relatively few knives, and the grandfathers, lucky enough to own one, carried a piece of history without knowing it. A true Skagel wore craftsmanship that machine-made knives could never touch, every line and curve shaped by one man's hands. Because Skagel worked alone and produced a limited number over his lifetime, genuine examples are extraordinarily rare, and collectors treat them as museum pieces. Authenticated Skagel knives routinely sell for several $1,000s, and the finest and rarest examples have brought tens of thousands at auction. If a knife in your grandfather's collection bears the Skagel stamp, you are not holding a tool. You are holding a small fortune and the very origin of the American handmade knife. So there they are, 20 hunting knives that once rode on the belts of American grandfathers and now hide fortunes in dresser drawers and tackle boxes across the country. From the dollar store Colonials to the legendary Skagel, the pattern is the same. The knives that seemed too ordinary to save became the ones collectors chase hardest, and the handmade legends only climbed higher. Go dig through that old cigar box, that garage tool bin, that sheath your grandfather left behind. Check the stampings, read the tang. The knife that dressed his deer for 40 years might just be worth more than his rifle. And if you find one, tell me in the comments what name is stamped on the blade. Somebody watching will know exactly what it's worth.